You hear that sound? That's music to the ears of a bike mechanic. Welcome to this week's Tuesday Tech Tip on Cyclecraft TV. Last week we talked all about headsets and how adjusting them is a maintenance item that's often overlooked. This week another item that people generally don't pay a lot of attention to until it's a real problem is spoke tension. Before we talk about spoke tension though, let's talk about how a bike wheel actually works. Now, this is for most bike wheels. There are a few exceptions. Mavic Cerium wheels, for example, are not exactly this system. But in general, most bike wheels are made this way. You start out with a rim, either aluminum or carbon fiber, in some cases steel, but usually carbon fiber or aluminum. In addition to the rim, you've got the hub, which is where all the bearings are and the gears connect to in the case of the rear wheel. And the third component is going to be the spokes, which is really just a steel wire held in tension, in dynamic tension, to keep the wheel round. Now, what's dynamic tension? That's the magic sauce that actually makes a wheel round and strong. So in order to make a wheel round and strong is that the spokes have to be in just exactly the right tension, and they all have to be pretty close to each other in tension in order to make sure that the rim doesn't move side to side or up and down. That really relies on all of the spoke tension being correct. So one of the questions that people ask is, well, how do we know what the right tension is? Well, a professional bike mechanic is going to be using a tensionometer more often than not to make sure that everything is correct. Now, you heard the sound of a wheel that spoke tension sounds pretty good. It's a kind of a musical sound. A wheel that is not tensioned properly is going to be this bad boy. We have this wheel laying around the shop, and I wanted to give you an idea what a low tension wheel sounds like. We spin that guy around. Hear that dull thunking sound. That usually means that the wheel needs to be retensioned. All of the spokes are going to be too loose. From a maintenance standpoint, though, a thing that people are really not paying attention to is the day-to-day stuff. Now, on most bikes these days that are coming with disc brakes, it is even a little bit more of an insidious problem because spokes will loosen up just a little bit and you won't know that they're getting looser. I'm going to talk about why that's a problem in just a minute. So basically, this wheel sounds like it's got essentially the right tension on it, but if we put it into the truing stand and we turn those calipers down, you're going to see that little scrapey sound. That means that the wheel, the rim, is hitting the caliper at one spot. And it usually will mean that one or two spokes are not in the correct tension in relationship to the other spokes. So when you bring a wheel in for a tune-up and you want to get your wheels trued, this is what we're talking about. We're just going to make a minor adjustment to one of these spokes to bring it back into tension with the rest of the wheel. You see now that sound is gone. All I did was adjust the tension on one spoke and that brought the wheel back into round. You can see in the picture here, it's not hopping up and down. So that's a very basic minor maintenance item that we can take care of usually very quickly. Now what will happen over time though is that if your wheel starts to loosen up, one spoke gets loose, two spokes get loose. As a spoke loosens, the faster it becomes loose. And the reason that happens is that because a wheel holding together is in dynamic tension, the magic force that makes a wheel round, every time that wheel goes around in a circle while you're riding it, whichever spoke is at the very bottom of the stroke, is all of the weight of the bike is pushing down and the rider is pushing down on the spoke. Just like a wire, when it detensions, it loosens up a little bit and then snaps back into tension. As your wheel spins around, that's happening in very, very minute amounts. So what will happen over time is that little bit of detention will become worse and worse and worse over time. At a certain point, one of the spokes may actually break because the mechanical action of that spoke loosening up, you'll see that a lot of times the spoke is going to break right here at the hub or right here at the nipple. Very, very seldom does a spoke break right in the middle unless it was scored and hit by something like a rock on a mountain bike trail or a stick or something along those lines. So that's something you definitely want to pay attention to, is when your wheel is spinning around. If you have a traditional bike wheel or bike with a rim brake on it, you can usually see that rim moving back and forth. On a disc brake, though, it's very difficult to see that. So it's not a bad idea. If one of your spokes is sounding like it's a little duller than the other spokes, you may want to bring it by the shop and have them check it out. It's also, as a matter of course, bring the wheel in and just have the tension checked by a mechanic using a truing stand. They're going to put the wheel on the stand and they're going to check to see if it's side to side moving or hopping up and down, and make some minor adjustments to it, assuming that all of the spokes are in relatively good tension. Now, over time, a wheel may loosen up a lot and we want to retension the whole wheel. Or if there are 3 or 4 or 5 spokes that are way out of tension, we're going to put a tensionometer on there. This is a tool that allows us to actually measure how much tension is on that spoke. And depending on the spoke and the brand, etc., there's going to be a range that is correct for that spoke. So on a rear wheel, such as this, we're looking for, I think it's 130 to 135 kilograms of force. You don't need to know all that stuff, but just to understand that that number is very important to be correct. Now, the other thing that we want to pay attention to is that sometimes you get a really bad bend in the rim, and you bring it to the shop and they retension it to actually get that bend out of the rim. The way that they make that happen is that, the rim actually has a mechanical bend in the rim, and they can sort of force it back into round by loosening a lot some spokes and retightening a whole bunch of other spokes. This is not a good situation, because what's going to happen is that first pothole that you hit, that wheel is going to pop right out of shape again. This dynamic tension only works assuming that the rim itself truly is perfectly flat, round. There's not a bend or it's not twisted like a pretzel. So that's an important consideration. Generally speaking, though, when we retension a wheel, all of these spokes need to be within 5 or 10% of each other in terms of the amount of tension that's on the spoke. So if the correct tension on a front wheel, for example, is usually 90 to 100 kilograms of force, if some of them are registering 70 and some of them are registering 110, well, that's way out of a 10% deviation from the correct number. So that's a wheel that there's definitely a problem going on there. Probably the rim is bad. So that's basically spoke tension in a nutshell. Now, the concepts are relatively simple, but truing a wheel, building a wheel, and tensioning spokes is kind of a subtle art and does take some practice over time. So if it's one of those kind of things that you'd like to learn, the best thing you do is get yourself a truing stand, a couple of spoke wrenches, and possibly a tensionometer. There's a lot of different ones out there you can use. There's also a book called The Art of the Wheel by a fellow named Job Sprant that will teach you all about building wheels. But it is a little bit of a subtle art. It's the kind of thing where if you enjoy doing mechanical work, you may want to get into it. If you just like riding your bike, you may want to just bring it by the shop and let us take care of that for you, because that's what we're here for. Anyway, that is my story on tension on spokes. Now, the one thing I did mention, this is an old school Mavic Cerium wheel, and it looks similar in that it's got a rim and it's got a hub and it has spokes on here, but these spokes are actually not steel, they're aluminum. And the wheel is not really held together through the mechanical spring action of the material, but it's a structure. It's actually more like a steel bridge than it is a traditional wheel. So while it does require a specific range of tension, this wheel is really being held together by the structure of the rim and the spokes and the hub. Not too many of these around anymore, and the majority of wheels that you're going to be seeing out in the world these days is going to be the traditional rim, steel, spoke, and hub configuration. Whether even the most expensive NV wheels are pretty much that setup compared to even the cheapest wheels. So paying attention to spoke tension is one of those maintenance items that a lot of people overlook, but it's actually really important for the longevity of your bike and obviously your safety as well. This is another thing on these Tuesday Tech Tips is that, we're talking about keeping your bike in good working order is a matter of performance and fun, but it's also a matter of safety. You want to make sure that all those things are organized correctly on your bike in order to keep you safe. Anyway, that's it for this week's Tuesday Tech Tip. Thanks for tuning in to Cyclecraft TV. We'll see you next time, and remember, keep the rubber side down.